Clara sat on the back of the wagon, her wrists tied with a rough rope that scratched her skin every time the wheels hit a stone. Dust rose behind them as her stepbrothers drove the horses harder, eager to finish their cruel task. She kept her back straight, even though her chest felt tight. She had learned long ago that crying never helped her, and showing fear only made things worse. Her father had been gone for only 3 months, and everything in her life had changed so fast that she sometimes wondered if she was living inside someone else's story. But the truth was simple. Her stepbrothers were desperate for money, owed debts all across town, and they saw her as something they could trade away. She never imagined they would actually do it. But that morning they had dragged her outside, tied her hands, and forced her into the wagon without a single explanation. When she begged to know what was happening, they only said she should be useful for once. The words had cut deeper than the rope. Now they were taking her far from the town she grew up in, into a hot and endless land that stretched out like a great empty ocean made of sand and rocks. Clara knew they were heading toward an Apache settlement, for they had been speaking about it in low whispers for days. She tried to think of any way to escape, but the open land around them offered no shelter, no hiding place, no hope. The sun climbed higher and burned her skin. Sweat ran down her back, but she held herself still, refusing to let her stepbrothers see her weakness. She stared ahead, pretending she was not afraid, pretending she was made of stone. But inside, worry churned like a storm. She had heard stories, some frightening, some respectful, about the Apache people. But she did not know which stories were true. What she did know was this: she was being traded like an object, and she had no say in what would happen next. Hours later, the wagon slowed as they approached a small valley. Clara saw smoke rising from several fires and simple shelters made from wood and hides. People were moving about, tending to animals, cooking, shaping tools. They all turned toward the wagon as her stepbrothers rode in, curious to see who had arrived. One figure stood slightly apart from the rest, tall and quiet. He wore soft buckskin clothes, and his long black hair was tied back with a narrow strand of leather. His dark eyes watched the wagon closely, but there was nothing sharp or cruel in his gaze. Clara felt strange when she looked at him, as if he could see through the fear she tried so hard to hide. Her stepbrother stopped the horses in front of him. "This is the one," the older brother said, pushing Clara forward. "Strong enough, quiet, and she won't cause trouble." Clara's heart pounded, yet she kept her chin up. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her invisible wounds. The tall man stepped closer. He didn't touch her. He didn't inspect her like a piece of trade. Instead, he studied her face with an expression she could not read. There was no hunger, no excitement, no rush to claim her, only calm patience. "My name is Nantan," he said in a steady voice. His English was clear, though accented. "You are safe here." Safe? Clara's stomach twisted at that word. How could this place be safe when she had been dragged here against her will? How could she trust any stranger when her own family had sold her? But Nantan's eyes held no threat, only a quiet strength that made her pause. Her stepbrothers looked impatient. "We brought her like you asked," the younger one said. "Now give us what you promised." Nantan nodded toward an older man, who handed over several bags. Clara knew they must be filled with something valuable: silver, tools, maybe food. Her stepbrothers barely glanced at her again. They simply took what they came for, climbed into the wagon, and rode away as fast as they could, leaving her standing in the dust. Clara stared after them, unable to understand how her life could break so easily. She felt the rope around her wrists loosen. Nantan had stepped closer, a small knife in his hand. He cut the rope carefully, making sure not to hurt her. She pulled her hands back once she was free, rubbing her aching skin. "You will not be harmed," Nantan said, stepping away to give her space. "No one will force you to do anything today." Clara didn't answer. Her throat felt too tight to speak. Fear mixed with confusion, and she didn't know what to believe. She expected roughness or commands. Instead, Nantan picked up a clay cup and filled it with water from a nearby pot. He placed it on a flat stone close to her, not too near, as if he understood she needed distance. "You have traveled far," he said. "Drink if you wish." She hesitated, but the heat and thirst won. She knelt and drank carefully, the cool water easing the dryness in her mouth. Her hands trembled slightly, but she kept them steady enough not to spill. When she looked up, Nantan had already walked a few steps back, respecting the space between them. Other Apache villagers watched quietly, not with anger or judgment, but with curiosity. A few women whispered softly, and some children peered from behind their mothers. Clara did not know their language, but she could tell they were talking about her arrival. Nantan motioned for her to follow him, but he did so with an open gesture, not a firm order. Clara hesitated again. She had no idea what he planned. But staying in the middle of the settlement with everyone staring felt worse. She walked slowly behind him, ready to run if anything frightened her. He led her to a small shelter made of wood poles, hides, and woven mats. It was simple, but clean. Someone had prepared it recently, and she wondered if it was meant for her. Nantan stepped aside so she could enter, but she stayed at the doorway, unsure. "I will bring food," he said softly. "You need strength." Clara hugged her arms around herself. She didn't understand why he was being gentle. Why would a man accept a woman from a trade and then treat her with patience? She watched him leave and return a few minutes later with a wooden bowl filled with cooked corn and meat. He set it just inside the shelter and stepped back. "You can rest," he said. "No one will trouble you." Clara didn't move until he walked away. She finally sat down on the floor of the small shelter. It was strange to feel fear and relief at the same time. The air smelled of smoke and herbs. She could hear the sound of children playing outside, the hum of voices, the crackle of fire. It felt like a world she had never known. She ate slowly, her mind racing. Why had Nantan asked for her? Why had he agreed to such a trade? What did he want from her? She looked through the doorway and saw him speaking quietly with some elders. He wasn't looking at her, wasn't checking if she ate or if she tried to escape. He acted as if she were not a prisoner, as if she were free. It made no sense, and yet deep in her heart, a tiny flicker of hope warmed her chest. Maybe she was not as lost as she feared. Maybe this strange, quiet man was not the danger she had been warned about. As the sun went down and the sky turned orange, Clara sat alone in the shelter, trying to understand the day that had changed her entire life. Her old world had thrown her away, but this new world had not tried to break her. And that confusion followed her like a shadow, stirring questions she didn't yet know how to ask. Clara woke the next morning before the sun had fully risen. She had slept only a few hours, and even those hours were filled with uneasy dreams. Her mind kept replaying the wagon, the dust, the moment her stepbrothers left her behind like a forgotten object. When she opened her eyes, she almost expected to still be in that wagon. But instead, she found herself inside the quiet Apache shelter, wrapped in a blanket she did not remember pulling over herself. Someone must have placed it on her during the night. Outside, she heard soft voices, the sound of horses, and the crackle of a small morning fire. For a moment, she stayed still, afraid to move. She did not know what was expected of her. She did not know the rules of this place. And she did not know if she should trust anyone, especially the man named Nantan. But the air inside the shelter was warm, smelling faintly of smoke and herbs. It felt nothing like the cold fear she had lived with back in her old home. She took a slow breath and stepped out, blinking at the early light. Nantan was already awake, standing with a group of older men. They were speaking quietly in their own language. Clara stood at a distance, unsure if she should approach. She felt out of place, like a stranger who had wandered into someone else's life. Nantan turned slightly and noticed her. He didn't call her forward, he didn't wave or demand. Instead, he excused himself from the group and walked toward her at a calm pace. Clara stood still, unsure of what to do. "You slept?" he asked gently. Clara nodded. Her voice felt stuck in her throat, so she didn't speak at first. After a moment, she managed to say, "Yes. Thank you." It felt strange to thank someone in a place where she did not belong, but Nantan accepted her words with a quiet nod. He carried a small wooden dish filled with fruit and bread-like pieces made from corn. "For you," he said. "Eat slowly." Clara took the dish carefully. She half expected him to step inside the shelter with her, but he didn't. Instead, he motioned to a shaded spot near the doorway. "You can sit there," he said. "No one will bother you." She watched him walk away. He didn't look back. He didn't check if she ate. He simply allowed her space. It confused her. Back home, she had spent her days walking on thin ice, always trying not to upset her stepbrothers. Every movement, every word had been watched and judged. Here, no one pushed her, no one questioned her, no one demanded anything from her. The freedom felt strange, and she didn't know if she should trust it. As she ate, some children gathered nearby. They didn't come too close, but they watched her with wide, curious eyes. One little girl stepped forward and offered Clara a small carved wooden bird. Clara hesitated before taking it. "Thank you," Clara whispered. The girl giggled and ran back to her friends. Clara held the wooden bird in her hand, surprised by the kindness of someone she had never met. It made her chest feel warm, though she didn't understand why. After she finished her food, Clara walked slowly toward the edge of the settlement. She wasn't trying to escape. She simply needed to breathe and understand her new world. She saw women grinding corn, men repairing weapons, and older villagers weaving baskets. Everyone seemed focused on their tasks, yet their movements held a rhythm that felt peaceful rather than harsh. She stopped near a small stream that ran along the valley. The water was clear, catching the early sun and shining like glass. Clara knelt beside it and dipped her hands in. The coolness calmed her racing thoughts. She knew she could not run. The land was too wide, too wild. And even if she did run, she had nowhere to go. Her stepbrothers would never take her back. No town nearby would protect her. And she doubted she could survive long alone on the open frontier. She closed her eyes, feeling frightened and strangely hopeful at the same time. "You are not trapped," Clara spun around. Nantan stood a few steps behind her. She hadn't heard him approach. "I didn't mean to run away," she said quickly, afraid he misunderstood. "I know," he replied quietly. "If you wanted to run, you would have gone toward the hills, not the stream." Clara looked at the ground, embarrassed that he had seen through her so easily. He stepped closer, but still left space between them. "Your first day here does not have to be heavy," Nantan said. "No one will ask you to work or follow rules. You can rest." Clara studied his face, searching for any sign of hidden motives, but all she saw was calm honesty. He wasn't trying to charm her or force her to trust him. He simply spoke with the kind of steady peace she had never known. Why did you take me?" she finally asked in a soft voice. Nantan looked at the flowing water before answering. "You were alone," he said. "Your brothers did not see your value. They only saw what they could gain. But I saw someone who needed safety." Clara felt her breath catch. Safety? She had never expected someone from another world, another culture, to say something so gentle. "But I was traded, she said quietly. You gave them something for me? Yes, Nantan admitted, but not to own you, to protect you. Clara didn't understand. People didn't give things away for free. People didn't help without wanting something in return. That had been the rule of her whole life. But why? She whispered. Nantan took a slow breath. Because I have seen what fear does to a person, and I do not want fear to be your life. Her throat tightened. She didn't know how to respond to such a simple, unexpected truth. No one back home had thought this way. No one had looked at her and seen anything but a burden. As the day passed, Nantan returned to his tasks. Clara watched him from a distance. He didn't show off or act like a hero. He moved with quiet confidence, helping the older villagers, repairing tools, checking the horses, and speaking kindly to the children. Everyone respected him, yet he never demanded attention. Later, the older women approached Clara with gentle smiles. Even though they spoke mostly in their own language, Clara understood their gestures. They showed her how to wash clothes by the stream, how to prepare simple food, and how to weave thin strands of grass into small baskets. They didn't force her to work, but they invited her to learn. She found herself relaxing around them. Their soft voices soothed her nerves. In the afternoon, one woman placed a soft shawl around Clara's shoulders. The cloth smelled of herbs and smoke. Clara didn't know why she felt so emotional, but kindness had always been rare in her life. Receiving it freely felt almost strange. As the sun lowered, Clara saw Nantan carrying pieces of wood toward a small open area. He was building something. She walked closer out of curiosity, though she kept a careful distance. "What are you making?" she asked. "A place for you to sit outside," he replied. "The evenings get cool, and the fire feels better when you have a seat." Clara stared at him in surprise. No one had ever made something for her before. Certainly no man had ever done so without expecting something in return. She didn't know how to process this strange kindness. "You don't have to do that," she whispered. "I know," he said simply. As the day turned to evening, Clara felt a shift inside her. She had arrived expecting fear, control, and danger, but instead she found quiet voices, respectful distance, gentle teachers, and a man who treated her like a person instead of a trade. She wasn't ready to trust this new life, not yet. Her past still clung to her like dust on her skin. But for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel completely alone. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she sensed that the world she had entered was not shaped by cruelty. It was shaped by patience, understanding, and silent strength. And that small discovery was enough to keep her heart steady as the night settled over the settlement, warm with firelight and new possibilities. Night settled over the Apache settlement like a soft blanket. The sky turned dark blue, then deeper, sprinkled with thousands of quiet stars. Clara had never seen the night look so clean. Back in her old town, smoke from chimneys and dust in the air usually hid the sky. Here it felt as if the heavens were close enough to touch. Still, even with the peaceful sky above her, Clara felt her stomach twist with worry. All day she had tried to understand this new world, this new man, and this strange sense of calm that kept surprising her. But night brought different fears. Night meant uncertainty. Night meant she would be alone inside the small shelter Nantan had given her. Her hands shook slightly as she sat inside, pulling her knees close. She tried to steady her breath. She didn't want to panic, but she didn't know what to expect. Every story she had ever heard told her that night was when everything changed. She had lived with fear for so long that her body expected something to go wrong. She expected a command, a demand, a force she could not escape. But nothing happened. For a long time, the only sound she heard was the soft wind brushing against the shelter walls. She could hear distant voices and the crackle of fires around the settlement, but no one approached her doorway. No one tried to enter. No one whispered outside her home. She waited and listened. She almost wished someone would speak just to break the heavy silence. After a while, she heard footsteps, slow, steady, not rushed. She tensed, her heart beating fast. The footsteps came closer, and a shadow appeared near the entrance. Clara's breath caught as the flap moved slightly. "It is only me," Nantan said, his voice gentle and steady. "I brought an extra blanket. The night gets cold." He didn't lift the flap fully. He didn't step inside. He only placed the folded blanket near the entrance and stepped back. "You can sleep without worry," he continued softly. "Nothing will disturb you. I will stay outside." Clara stared at the shadow of his figure against the firelight outside. Confusion filled her more than fear. She opened her mouth, wanting to ask why he was being so patient with her, but the words refused to come. Nantan didn't wait for a reply. He turned and sat just outside the shelter, leaning against one of the wooden support poles. She could see his silhouette, broad shoulders, straight back, calm presence, like a silent guardian watching over her. Clara's throat tightened. No one had ever guarded her before. No one had ever cared enough to sit outside her door just to make sure she felt safe. She whispered under her breath, "Why are you doing this?" He didn't hear her, or maybe he chose not to respond. Clara lay down slowly, pulling the blanket over herself. Her mind raced. She expected him to change his mind, expected him to come inside at some point of the night. But he didn't. She could hear the soft sounds of the settlement fading one by one as everyone went to sleep. Only the quiet rustling of the wind and the crackle of a distant fire remained. Minutes turned into an hour, then 2. At some point, Clara forced herself to peek outside through a small gap in the shelter wall. Nantan was still there, sitting exactly as before. His head was tilted slightly as if he was listening to every sound around them. He wasn't asleep. He was keeping watch for her. Clara didn't know how to feel. Part of her wanted to cry from relief. Another part wanted to question everything. But a larger part, an unexpected part, felt a warmth in her chest that made her eyes sting. Something inside her softened a little, the tight walls she had built over years beginning to crack. She tried to sleep, but her thoughts kept circling. Why was he so gentle? Why was he giving her space? Why hadn't he tried to claim anything from her? The world she came from had taught her that kindness came with a price. Yet here was a man who seemed to protect without wanting anything back. Hours passed before Clara finally drifted into sleep. When she woke again, it was still dark, but the air was colder. The fire outside had burned low. She pushed the blanket aside and peeked out. Nantan had not moved. His back was straight, though she could tell he must be tired. The night had grown long, yet he stayed awake to make sure she felt safe. Clara stepped quietly toward the doorway and whispered, "You don't have to sit out here all night." Nantan turned his head but didn't shift his position. "I gave my word. You will not be afraid tonight." Clara lowered her eyes. She didn't know how to respond to a promise like that. "You should sleep," she said softly. "I will rest when the sun rises," he replied calmly. Clara's chest tightened again. She wanted to argue but couldn't. She didn't have the words, and she didn't have the strength to understand him fully. She went back inside, her heart beating strangely fast. She lay back down, this time with a different feeling inside, a small spark of trust she had not felt in years. By dawn, Clara woke to the sound of birds. The sun was slowly climbing over the valley, painting everything with a soft golden light. She sat up and stretched her stiff arms. When she stepped outside, she found Nantan still seated near the pole, though now his eyes were closed. He looked exhausted, but peaceful. His calm expression almost made her smile. Almost. "You didn't sleep," she said softly. Nantan opened his eyes and looked up at her. "A little," he admitted, "but not enough to leave you alone." Clara felt something shift inside her again. The way he spoke made it clear that protecting her wasn't a burden to him. It was a promise he believed in. "You didn't have to do that," she said gently. Nantan stood up slowly, stretching his stiff muscles. "I chose to," he replied. "You have had many days filled with fear. You needed one night without it." Clara didn't know how to answer. She only stood there watching him as he walked toward the center of the settlement to help start the morning chores. A quiet ache grew in her chest, an ache she didn't understand, something warm and heavy at the same time. As she watched him carry water, speak to the elders, and greet the children, she realized that the moment that stole her breath wasn't a dramatic act, not a sudden gesture, not a loud promise. It was the simple truth. He gave her space. He gave her comfort. He gave her the first peaceful night she had ever known. And he asked for nothing in return. That single night changed something in Clara's heart. She didn't trust him fully yet. She didn't understand him fully yet. But she felt a quiet shift, a soft beginning of something she never expected, a small sense of safety growing where fear used to live. It was fragile, new, and confusing, but it was real, and that alone was enough to steal her breath more than anything she had ever known. Clara woke on her fourth morning in the Apache settlement with a strange new feeling inside her. It wasn't fear and it wasn't confusion, at least not the sharp kind she had felt before. It was something softer, something she did not recognize at first. She sat on the edge of her small sleeping mat, watching the morning light stretch across the ground outside her shelter. The air was cool, and a gentle breeze carried the smell of smoke and wild herbs. For the first time in many months, she felt rested. She stepped outside and saw Nantan near the fire, speaking quietly with an older woman who handed him a basket. When he noticed Clara, he paused and nodded politely, as if giving her a quiet greeting without interrupting her space. Clara returned the nod shyly. She still didn't know how to behave around him. He treated her with such natural respect that she sometimes didn't know what to do with her hands or her voice. After finishing his conversation, Nantan carried the basket toward her. Clara straightened her posture, unsure if he needed her help. "These are fresh berries," he said gently. "The women gathered them at sunrise. They wanted you to have some." Clara accepted the basket carefully. The berries were small and bright, shining like tiny jewels. She whispered her thanks. Nantan smiled softly, just a slight curve of his lips, but warm enough to make her feel something flutter inside her chest. "You helped them yesterday," he said, "so they wished to help you in return." Clara remembered the previous day with surprising clarity. She had spent the afternoon sitting with the older women, watching them weave baskets and mend clothes. They had taught her the names of simple things: water, sun, food, friend, using gestures and patient smiles. Clara had repeated the words awkwardly, making them laugh softly. But the laughter had never felt cruel. It had felt welcoming, like a bridge between two worlds. "I liked helping," Clara said quietly. "You were good at it," Nantan replied. "They said your hands are careful and your heart is patient." Clara looked down quickly, embarrassed but touched. Compliments were rare in her old life. Most of her days back home were spent trying not to be noticed, trying not to make mistakes that would lead to harsh words from her stepbrothers. Hearing gentle comments felt new, almost strange, but it warmed her more than the morning sun. After breakfast, Nantan invited her to walk with him to the river. Clara hesitated at first, but then she nodded. She felt safer around him than she expected. They walked along a narrow dirt path, passing tall grasses that brushed against their legs. The sky above them was wide and clear, making everything seem larger and freer than the world Clara used to know. When they reached the riverbank, Nantan walked to a fallen log and sat down. Clara stayed standing at first, unsure if she should join him, but when he motioned gently to the space beside him, she sat down slowly, leaving a respectful distance. For a while, neither of them spoke. They simply watched the water move in soft waves, sparkling in the sunlight. Clara found the quiet comfortable, not heavy like silence had once been for her. Finally, Nantan broke the stillness with a calm voice. "You must wonder many things about this place," he said. Clara nodded. "Yes, but I don't know how to ask." "You can ask anything," he said. "I will answer with truth." Clara gathered courage and asked the question that had been in her heart since the day she arrived. "Those women, they said yesterday that you did not take a wife before me. Why?" Nantan looked at the flowing water for a long moment before speaking. "When I was a child," he began slowly, "my mother suffered much. She was taken by men who did not care for her, men who believed strength meant taking what they wanted. My father found her after she escaped. He cared for her, but her past left deep pain inside her." Clara listened closely. His voice carried no anger, only sadness and understanding, as if the memories were stones he had carried all his life. "My father taught me," Nantan continued, "that a woman's heart is not something to hold by force. He said a man must earn trust, not demand it." Clara felt her throat tighten. Nantan's words echoed through her chest, touching a place she thought had turned numb long ago. "So I waited," he said. "I wanted a wife someday, yes, someone to share life with, someone to protect, someone who could walk beside me. But I wished to choose someone who needed peace as much as I did, and someone who would choose me in return." He turned to her gently. "When your stepbrothers came with you, I saw fear in your eyes, but I also saw strength. You were not broken. You were tired, but you still stood straight, like a tree that survived a storm." Clara felt her cheeks warm. No one had ever looked at her and seen strength. She had spent most of her life trying to make herself small, trying to avoid attention. Hearing those words made her feel seen in a way she had never experienced. "You didn't choose me," Clara whispered. "I was sold." "I know," Nantan said softly, "and I will never forget that. I did not accept the trade to own you. I accepted it because I could not let you be taken by someone who would harm you." Clara's eyes filled with tears she didn't want to show. She blinked them back quickly. "You could have left me alone," she said. "Why help me?" "Because helping you was the right path," he replied simply. "And because your spirit deserves gentleness." Clara looked away, overwhelmed by the quiet sincerity of his words. They sat by the river for a long time, letting the wind and the water speak for them. Eventually, Nantan stood and offered her a hand, not to pull her or guide her, but simply to help her stand if she wished. She accepted his hand. His touch was steady, warm, and respectful. He let go immediately once she was on her feet, showing again that he did not want to take more than she offered. The days that followed became easier for Clara. She began helping the women cook, fetch water, and prepare herbs. She laughed with the children, learning small bits of their language. She spent evenings near the fire, listening to stories told by the elders. And she found her eyes drifting toward Nantan more often, watching his calm movements, his soft way of speaking, his kindness toward everyone. Each day, her heart healed a little more. Each day, trust grew where fear once lived. One evening, Clara surprised even herself. She sat beside Nantan without waiting for him to invite her. It felt natural somehow, as if her feet had moved on their own. She watched him tend the fire, adding small sticks and blowing gently to keep the flames strong. "You are learning our ways quickly," Nantan said without looking at her. "Only because people are patient with me," she replied. "You give patience back," he said. "That is why they welcome you." Clara lowered her gaze, touched by his words. "You have been patient too," she whispered. "More patient than anyone I ever knew." Nantan looked at her then, his eyes warm in the firelight. "You deserve patience." A quiet warmth spread through her chest, soft, deep, and new. She felt safe. She felt seen. She felt something growing inside her, something she couldn't yet name. For the first time in her life, she began to imagine a future not shaped by fear, a future with choices, a future with peace. And as she sat beside Nantan, she realized that the man she had once feared was slowly becoming the person she trusted the most. Not because he demanded it, but because he earned it. Through every soft word, every respectful step, every moment of quiet protection. It was a beginning she never expected, and it changed everything. Clara sat near the evening fire, her hands folded in her lap as the soft orange light danced across her face. She could feel the calm night settling over the Apache settlement like a gentle blanket. The children were finishing their games, the older women were wrapping up their tasks, and the men were putting away tools. Everything moved in a peaceful rhythm, as if the whole world breathed slowly and kindly here. She glanced toward Nantan, who was helping an elder carry a heavy basket across the clearing. He did it with the same quiet strength that followed him everywhere. Nothing he did was loud or proud. Everything he did came from a place of sincerity. Clara watched him without realizing she had been watching. Her heart felt different these days, lighter, warmer, steadier. She still feared the unknown future, but she no longer feared Nantan. In fact, she found a strange comfort in the way he moved, spoke, and listened. Each day she spent near him made her feel more connected to this new world. Nantan finished his work and walked toward her. He sat on the ground not too close, not too far, always giving her room to choose how near she wanted to be. Clara felt a flutter inside her chest as she smiled softly. "You look peaceful," Nantan said gently. "I feel calmer than before," she admitted. "I never thought I could feel this way again." "That makes me glad," he said. "Peace is a good companion." Clara looked around the settlement, seeing the warm glow of fires, the silhouettes of families sitting close, the sound of soft laughter fading into the night. It felt like a place she had always searched for, without knowing it existed. "I didn't think I could ever feel safe again," she whispered. "But you made it possible." Nantan looked at her with thoughtful eyes. "You made your own safety," he replied. "You learned to breathe again. You learned to trust your steps. I only made sure the path was clear." Clara lowered her gaze, touched deeply by his words. "You gave me something no one else has ever given me," she said softly. "What is that?" Nantan asked. "Choice," Clara said. "You let me choose how close to stand, choose when to speak, choose how to move. You didn't treat me like property. You treated me like a person." Nantan's expression softened even more. "That is because you are," he said, "a strong person." Those simple words made a tear escape her eye. She quickly wiped it away, embarrassed. But Nantan pretended not to notice, giving her dignity instead of questions. After a long, quiet moment, Clara found herself speaking again. "I thought I came here alone, but I don't feel alone anymore." "You are not," Nantan said gently. "No one stands alone here." Clara took a slow breath, feeling warmth rush through her chest. She didn't know how to say what she felt inside. She had carried her fears for so many years that they had become a part of her. Now everything was changing faster than she expected. She looked at Nantan again, really looked at him, at the calm strength in his face, the sincerity in his eyes, the protective patience in every action he made. She thought about the night he stayed outside her shelter, awake for hours just to keep her safe. She thought about the days he worked silently, but always noticed if she needed something. She thought about how he never stepped beyond her comfort, never asked for anything she could not give. And she realized that this man had become something important to her. Important in a way she could not explain with simple words. The fire crackled softly, sending sparks into the night sky. Clara took a deep breath and sat a little closer to him, just a few inches, but enough for him to notice. Nantan did not move away, but he didn't lean in either. He waited, as always, for her choice. Clara understood then that trust was not something he demanded. It was something he earned every day. She spoke in a soft, careful voice. "I never thought I could feel safe beside someone." Nantan turned to her gently. "You feel safe beside me?" Clara nodded slowly. "Yes, more than I ever thought possible." A warm silence stretched between them, filled with understanding. The air around them felt softer, as if the night itself listened. Clara looked down at her hands. "Back home, no one cared what I wanted. No one asked how I felt. But here, you give me room to be myself." "That is all I wished," Nantan said, "to give you room to breathe." Clara felt tears fill her eyes again, but this time she didn't hide them. They weren't tears of fear or sadness. They were tears of relief, of finally feeling seen. She lifted her head and whispered, "Thank you for everything." Nantan bowed his head slightly. "You owe me no thanks. I only did what was right." But Clara shook her head gently. "No, you did more than that. You gave me kindness when you didn't have to. You protected me even before I trusted you. You helped me learn to live again." She looked into his eyes, her voice trembling but full of truth. "You changed my life." Nantan's chest rose slowly as he breathed in, as if her words touched him deeply. After another quiet moment, Clara spoke again, her voice soft but steady. "You said once that you did not want to choose a wife by force. You wanted someone who would choose you in return." Nantan watched her carefully, not speaking, not pushing. His stillness told her he would accept whatever she said next, even if she chose a different path. Clara felt her pulse quicken. I think I want to stay," she whispered. "Not because I must, but because I feel safe here, and because I trust you." Nantan's eyes softened in a way Clara had never seen before, warm, grateful, almost emotional. But he still did not reach for her. He still waited for her choice. "You may stay as long as you wish," he said quietly, "even if you never choose me, even if you only want friendship." Clara smiled gently. "I choose to stay with you," she said. "Not just here, but beside you." This time, Nantan's breath caught, as if her words shook something deep inside him. Slowly, carefully, he lifted his hand, not to take hers, but to place it near her hand on the ground, close enough for her to choose. Clara understood. She placed her hand on top of his. It was the simplest gesture, but it held more meaning than any promise she had ever made in her life. In that moment, she wasn't afraid. She wasn't lost. She wasn't someone's burden or someone's trade. She was a woman who had chosen her own future. Nantan closed his fingers gently around hers, his touch warm and respectful. He didn't pull her closer. He didn't rush anything. He simply held her hand with the same steadiness he showed on every day she had known him. Clara felt her heart open, not with fear, but with relief. Sweet, deep, peaceful relief. She leaned her head slightly toward him, not touching his shoulder, but close enough that he knew she trusted him fully now. The night around them felt still. Even the fire seemed to burn softer. Clara whispered, "This is the first time I have felt hope in years." Nanton replied quietly, "Then let us build a life where hope grows." And under the shared glow of fire and stars, Clara realized the truth she had been slowly discovering since the day she arrived. The man she was once sold to had become the man she freely chose, not through force, not through fear, but through kindness, patience, and gentle strength. And that was what truly stole her breath away.